All right, and today I am joined by Looney, also known as Gabriel. And do you want to introduce yourself? So say who you are, what your relationship to the language learning community is.
Yeah, I'm known online as Looney Tunes or Gabriel. Um, I think I really joined the language learning community through Refold because I basically made my Discord to join the Refold, and then I sort of became a known person in the community in a way.
Yeah, so when he first joined, I thought he was a girl because of his profile picture.
It was a pirate boy.
It was a doll, and I don't know, I just assumed, wrongly, that he was a girl. And when I first heard his voice, like, I don't know, a year or two ago, because he's very active in the Refold community, I was like, wow, his voice is really deep. He's not a girl.
I'm pretty nervous, so like I'm probably gonna speak like 3 octaves higher.
That's totally fine. And I've been wanting you to get on the channel for a while now. I've been pestering you periodically for months now. You recently started a YouTube channel. Do you want to talk about your YouTube channel?
Um, so like I started the reason why I started doing AOG lessons was because I wanted to promote the method. And I started offering lessons to
So,
people that ain't.
so go ahead and, for the people who don't know, explain what ALG is, because it's not a refold, but it's like refold adjacent.
Yeah, yeah. So I assume everyone here is like familiar with the input hypothesis. So what AOG does is to create an environment where your only source of input is comprehensible input, basically. And you basically acquire your language like you did with your first language, like pretty much like a baby. So little by little, the content gets harder and harder and harder. And that's pretty much it.
And a good
The
example
teachers
of
use
an ALG channel would be like Dreaming Spanish.
German Spanish, yeah.
Dreaming Spanish has sort of taken the ALG methodology and run with it.
You use you use visual aids and other stuff to maybe props to make things more comprehensible and stuff.
And where does it differ from Refold? You know, like, for example, in Refold, we recommend starting with texts pretty early, and we recommend doing lookups. How about with ALG?
To be honest, um, I was there for the very first Refold podcast ever. And I remember one of the early episodes was about hot takes, I think. And I
Okay.
remember that I was in a chat and I said, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation if every language existing or something had a Dreaming Spanish for it. And everyone agreed, like everyone stayed silent. So I don't think they should be separate. Like to me, Refold should be producing comprehensible input.
Yeah, so one thing that we have been doing is we've been subtitling newer episodes. And then we use AI to subtitle them. And then I will periodically go through and manually correct them. And I've started a link course for the Refold podcast. So you can go through and read it on link. But we're definitely not doing ALG type content. So ALG is very much raw comprehensible input without things like dictionary aid, without subtitles, very much audio listening. And yeah, you got into ALG early on, and then at some point you started teaching private lessons with ALG. You want to talk a little bit about your lessons and how you teach using comprehensible input?
Yeah. The first lessons, they were a bit chaotic. I'm not gonna say I failed, but like they were very different than the way I do it now. Because nowadays I just use slides. And back then I was trying to draw, and I can't draw. Our friend Scott, he's trying to teach me, but I'm just terrible at it. So we like try to draw and have a bunch of props set, and it just didn't work. Like it was just pretty time consuming as well. So I started making slides, and what I would do in those lessons would be tell personal stories. And that for some reason created this bonding with my students. Like we would laugh a lot together and stuff. And when I created the channel, I saw that I maybe should not rely on that, because at some point I'm gonna run out of stories, you know? So I'm trying to not rely on creativity anymore and not rely on my personal stories anymore. So this is why I now use the format that I use now, you know, talk about movies and comics and stuff.
Yeah, I've heard good things about your tutoring. I believe you tutor several people in the community,
Yeah,
and then you also tutor outside of the community, sort of. I believe Bree, our social media manager, you know her.
yeah,
I believe her father is a regular student of yours.
yes.
So for listeners, Bree's father is married to a lovely Brazilian woman. So her
Shout out.
stepmother, yeah, her stepmother is a Portuguese speaker, and her father has been using immersion to learn, and Looney here has been his tutor.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy about it because like Bree told me that he had tried learning before, and he just ended up like frustrated. And she told him like, now you don't have to do anything. You just have to go there, have a good time, and that's it. That's all you have to do. And then he started liking it. And I know he actually likes it because always after a lesson, Bree would text me saying, "Hey, I just called my dad. He loves your lessons."
So my question for you is, why did you take an ALG approach, the automatic language growth approach, rather than doing something more classically Refold?
Mhm. I did the classical Refold method like for years, and at least for me, language learning's taught me that I could learn things on my own. And one of those things that I learned on my own was psychology. And I think people don't give Matt enough credit because he brought a lot of cognitive psychology to the table. And basically, everything that I was learning on cognitive psychology aligned with whatever the ALG literature was saying. And Matt also was like, I think if I were to learn Japanese again, I think I would just listen for the earlier stages. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna try that. That makes sense. And the thread is probably still there, but I think Flozen Frame, he created a thread because we were talking about it, like listening only. And I don't know, it just like grew on us, like me and my friends, Skype on, who was on a show, Scott, Flozen as well. We just sort of got fascinated with this approach, and then one person responded, a person called Velvet Cookie. You know her, the Norwegian programmer.
I know Velvet Cookie, Norwegian learning Thai.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she answered me, and she said she she was an AOG learner, but like not just any AOG learner. Like she was learning Italian with the OG
Right, because
AOG schooling.
ALG, well, who was the guy created it? Marvin Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got his start with it in Thai. So I think
Yes.
that a lot of Thai learners are familiar with ALG.
Yeah. And this sort of made things more complicated, at least for me, because AOG for the longest time was something that you heard about and never got to experience before learning Spanish. But then, I think that after dreaming Spanish, there's this surge of CI channels, including myself. So like more people are having the opportunity to experience how the AOG method feels.
Interesting. Do you happen to have any of your materials that you've created with you?
With what?
Like with you right now on the computer that you're on? Do you have your slides and everything?
I do, but
You
it's
do.
on my other account. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Um, I was wondering if maybe you could show them, but I guess if they're on a different profile, that
Yeah.
would not be feasible. That's okay.
Maybe go on my channel, watch some videos.
For sure. And I think it's interesting how since Dreaming Spanish has taken off, we're seeing more ALG content creators. You touched on this briefly. And maybe in the future, we will see more and more, and it will be easier to get your foot in the door with
Yeah.
immersion learning.
And you know what's interesting? Like every time I have an insight about AOG, I revisit whatever Pablo said, and whatever my insight was, Pablo has already said it. Like he figured out everything. He's that good.
So, I wanted to ask a little bit about your history with languages. You are technically a polyglot, although you don't parade yourself as one. Um, you want to talk a little bit about what languages you speak? So, you do have a little bit of a Portuguese tinge to your spoken English, but I got a comment from the community that your written output is always very native-like. People forget that you're not a native. Um, in addition to English and then your native Portuguese, what other languages are you familiar with?
Um,
Say the Romance languages, because I know that you're sort of a Romance guru.
no. The romance guru to me is Clayton. He's the romance lord. Um, it's complicated because like I feel that any avid language learner went through a phase where they just sample a lot of languages, and I obviously had that phase as well. But by the end of high school, I remember telling a friend that I wanted to learn German, Russian, Italian, and Japanese, and he told me I was crazy. But one day I was at a bookstore, and this book was sort of beckoning me. The book was called Asmil, and I started flipping through the pages, and I was like blown away. Like it was doing something I didn't know was possible, basically. But I was curious, like what else is there? So I found Michelle Thomas, and I used it for German, Russian, and Italian. And for Italian and Russian, I just got the basics. Like I'm not even, barely a two in those languages. But Italian I got pretty decent. Um, I remember that after I did Michelle Thomas, I decided to enroll in a course. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, to enroll in a course.
Yeah. And it had been like only 3 months or something, and they were gonna put me like in high B1 level. So that was easy. And actually, I had no interest in learning Spanish. Not at all. Like
Which is
I
interesting to me because, at least in the Discord voice chats, you seem to take any opportunity you get to speak
yeah,
Spanish with
yeah.
people.
Me and Skype, when we talk a lot about that because we feel that Spanish is sort of a social loop, like it's part of the game for you to be more outgoing and stuff. And that's not necessarily true for English. So I don't know. I feel like I just jump right in Spanish. Um, so I didn't want to learn Spanish. It was not on my plans, but I had a lot of Spanish-speaking friends. So I was like, fine, I'm gonna learn it. I caved in. So I used Michelle Thomas, and eventually I started doing Refold. And let's say my comprehension is like really high to the point where at some point I was trying to use audiobooks to see if I would level up, but I ended up getting bored. So that's pretty high. And my comprehension in English is also pretty high. And for Japanese, I'm like a beginner still. So I don't consider myself a polyglot. Like,
Now, with Japanese, that was the first one that you did ALG for, right?
yeah,
So you did the comprehensible content circuit with Japanese.
yeah.
Gotcha. And at one point, you shared with me a book that compared the Romance languages.
Yes.
So you're being very humble about it, but I do
Ah,
believe that you have some Romance ability outside of Portuguese. You've got Spanish, maybe a little bit of Italian.
I mean, it's pretty rare for me to hear a Romance language that I don't understand. I think I can understand the languages from Spain. I can understand Mirandese, a lot of the languages of Italy. Um, I've never dabbled in French, never. I've
You
dabbled in
understand
Romanian
French.
before, so I can understand some Romanian. I actually had a crosstalk session in Romanian these days. It was really good, and I understood everything. I don't know, man. I
You,
can.
you mentioned crosstalk, and do you have plans to offer crosstalk classes as part of your offerings as a tutor?
That's my tutoring. That's what my tutoring consists of. It's it has a crosstalk format, but it's mostly me doing the talking.
Right.
So the crosstalk part's more like me being in the moment with my student and reacting to their reactions and adjusting in real time.
Gotcha. Now you've got me tempted. Now I want Portuguese lessons.
George's gonna be on a channel, everyone.
Oh, that would be fun. I would actually be very open to that. I would be open to playing the role of the non-Portuguese speaker in a video. I would be open
Bree's
to
gonna
that.
be on it.
Oh, right. Cool. So when it comes to all of these like videos and the comprehensible lessons, um, what video type is your absolute favorite to do for your channel?
Um, that's complicated because my channel is like in its early stages.
It's in
So
its
I'm like,
infancy, yeah.
yeah. So I'm trying a bunch of different formats. Um, it's funny because like they are just as fun, all of the formats, but they are also just as stressful. Because like setting up everything is very stressful, and I'm a vocal underdoer, so like I spend days without talking basically. So like every lesson I almost lose my voice because I don't practice that as much as I should. So that's the stressful part. But I do have fun preparing it and dealing with the creative part. I'm actually preparing a new video, which is gonna be me describing pictures. And these pictures, I try to find like unhinged, wild pictures, like cursed pictures to make the videos. So like I'm always having a good giggle making preparing those videos. So they're probably soon going to be out.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So one of the things that I've heard from the team, because the team has taken an interest in your channel, is that sometimes it feels like your videos have almost too much effort put into them, where there's
They do.
concern that they're going to be sustainable for the long run.
Mm.
You know,
No, I think this format that I found is pretty sustainable. Um, the reason why is because I don't have to. I mean, like, what's the issue right now? Like, we need to have enough content. It's like my way to just like produce massive amounts of content has been just doing what I'm doing now. Like, what I'm doing now is actually a subgenre of AOG. It's called movie talk, where you describe movies and stuff. So that's sort of what I've been doing. And this way you just don't run out of content. I don't think like there's any difference between what I do and a regular content creator. You know? I think that in the future probably like
so
the
do you have any,
what yeah.
do you have any goals with your content? Like how, like right now you do not have too many videos out there.
Mhm.
It's in its infancy. Do you have an hour goal? You know, like sort of how Dreaming Spanish has this 1,000 hour goal,
Mhm.
where you can get 1,000 hours of content.
My goal is to like first of all like help people to not to use flashcards, for example. And just free flow in the beginning stages. That's my goal for now. And the channel sort of assumes you already know English. So a good estimate would be that to be level 1 in Portuguese, you would need 40 hours, pretty much. So if I can get like 40 hours of beginner content, like I'm already happy. Like I feel like I've accomplished my mission. And other than that, I think in the longer run, I think about having another teacher and just rip off each other and stuff. I think about,
You know, there's a channel I very much like for Portuguese called Portuguese with Leo.
love Leo, yeah.
And I think the only thing that could be potentially off-putting with his content is that he is European.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't mind. I really don't mind. But definitely a non-zero number of Portuguese learners want Brazilian.
I don't know if you can use Leo's content necessarily, always, because I feel like
My issue, yeah, I'm not like a true beginner with Portuguese. You know, I have pretty good comprehension.
you're a romance king, obviously.
Yeah, I'm a romance king. At least my Spanish can carry me a little bit. But I very much like his content. But I can see how it would be tough to get into if you were a rank beginner.
I think I heard him saying once that most of the people who watch his channel are Portuguese speakers. He sort of became...
His content is just inherently interesting.
Yeah.
You know? He interviews cool people. He talks about various topics, history, culture, and I honestly think that his channel is just inherently interesting, even if you were not a Portuguese learner.
He sort of became like the Portuguese Linguriosa.
Right. And I'm also a fan of Linguriosa's channel for similar reasons, because she talks about linguistics and culture and history.
It's incredible.
Yes, I'm a big fan. So, yeah, right now, what does the market look like? Not the market, that's not what I mean to say. The viewership. What's the scene like? Yeah, what's the scene like when it comes to Portuguese CI channels? How many of other people are there in your space?
Well, I've seen like 3 more channels or something. And for European Portuguese, I don't think there's any besides like things that you can't really free flow at the beginner stages. Like it's more intermediate stuff. I don't know. Like I think I'm the only one mass producing now. Like I don't really know, but like I hope that more people make more channels because that's what's going to be more beneficial in the long run. I think that in the future, if things go right, the comprehensible input scene is going to be like any regular content creation scene. Like you can watch the creators that you like the most instead of watching the ones that you need to watch in order to get some input.
Gotcha. Yeah. So many ideas out there. I personally would love to watch a vlog of you in simple Portuguese walking around Brazil and just talking about things.
I'm a hermit. So
I know you're a hermit, but you have gone out for walks before and you've seen strange things like people in a Spider-Man or a Batman costume.
Oh.
I really enjoy that type of content. Like when I watch content in Portuguese, it's almost always like either travel-y or culture-y. I'm a big fan of Patria Minha. Are you familiar with that channel?
No.
He's from, I think, Mozambique. And it's very interesting to watch him. He hunts for food. He uses hateiros, like little rat traps to catch jungle rats to eat. And like electricity in Africa is often prepaid.
Yeah.
So it's interesting watching him go and like buy his electricity, his prepaid electricity, and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So like Portuguese with Leo, which is a learner channel, but I feel like you said most people who watch it are not learners. And Patria Minha, because again, just the African content. That's one thing that I've always found missing with Spanish, is that unlike Spanish, which just has Equatorial Guinea, Portuguese spoken over a lot of Africa. There are at least 3, maybe even 4 African-speaking countries or African countries that speak Portuguese.
I think it's Cabo Verde, Mozambique, Angola. There might be more, but I don't know.
São Tomé e Príncipe.
Yeah,
that's 4. And Angola and Mozambique are 2 very big countries.
True. There's actually been surgeons of Angola and Mozambican. How do you say that? Mozambican YouTubers. And they're really good, but they come to Brazil because people in their countries don't take them very serious, And apparently, like, people had some violent reactions towards them. It's pretty weird. I don't know, but it's definitely interesting seeing like how Africa is, because you showed me some videos, and it's interesting. It's like even though you share a language, it has a really different culture. Like you cannot expect.
I tell people all the time. I tell people all the time. People talk about English language culture as though it's unitary, and I'm like, is it really though? If you go to Liberia, English-speaking Africa, the culture in Liberia is going to be very different to the culture in Singapore. Where both countries have a strong command of English, the cultures are different. So I'm glad that you touched on that, because people will conflate language with culture. And I'm like, not really. If you compare Americans to, say, Australians, there's going to be differences.
True.
So I'm glad that you touched on that. Sharing a language does not mean that you share a culture.
True.
And it differs even in the same country, right? A Southerner in the States or a Gaúcho in Brazil are going to have a different culture to people from the north of the respective countries.
That's really funny that you talk about gauchos, because like gauchos, they are known for, like in Brazil, there's a rock scene that's it's rooted on post-punk. They're very post-punky, but they're sort of pop, sort of new wave-ish as well. And that's most of the country. But Rio Grande do Sul, they have their own rock culture. And they are only they're stadium bands. They are only stadium bands in the state, like outside of the state. They don't play big concerts. And their type of rock and roll is like really rooted in the 60s. So like the Beatles and Rolling Stones and stuff. And the 70s as well, like Ramones. But the punk rock scene is very interesting because they don't like how the Portuguese language sounded with punk rock. So they started speaking, the lyrics are in Portuguese, but the phonetics are in English. And that resulted in a very interesting sound.
Yeah, I can imagine, for sure. Yeah, so again, the takeaway point is that culture can vary within the language, even within the same country.
Yeah.
Someone from Bahia is going to be different to someone from Rio Grande do Sul, and yeah, I can believe that. Yeah, I tell you, I really like those videos though that they have in Brazil of people who live in the rural areas just doing rural stuff. We talked a little bit about this before the podcast today, like the pacu fish, and fishing, and carving stuff and building houses out of logs. It seems like there's a lot of internal diversity in Brazil.
I don't know, like I barely traveled in the country. Like I've been to some cities nearby, but they were like urban areas as well. So no, I've been to a farm once, but it was not really that different as well. But yeah, I'm a city boy, guilty.
You're not from the Roça.
No.
Yeah, and it was one thing that really surprised me about Portuguese as a language is that Brazilians have this sertanejo music, which reminds me of country music, but in Portuguese. It's songs about botas and chapéus and things like that, horses, and it reminds me a lot of American country music from like the South, but it's in Portuguese.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I've been trying to learn some country stuff, and it's really, really hard to play on guitar. It's like they do some possible stuff, man. It's nuts. Yeah, I can see the parallel, but people talk a lot about the sertanejo scene, and that nowadays it's like a very different thing. It's mostly like the instrumental part is sort of sertanejo, but the lyrics are basically like any gangsta rap lyrics, basically.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can only think of a few songs off the top of my head, but it's usually like, I can walk, but I prefer my horse, or I have a hat, or I have boots, or I have a 4x4. But I don't know what the classic sertanejo is like,
There's one that I like a lot because it has an urban legend. I think the name of the duo was Tonico e Tinoco. And they have a song called Divine Justice or something. And it's about a man who killed his wife to elope with his lover. But then he and the lover, they got married, but his wife's corpse appeared in the picture. And the song's about that. So like I can see like that's very like Hank Williams, something you would see in that era, that type of stuff, that aesthetic. That's pretty similar as well, I think.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, one thing that trips me up about Brazil is the time zone, because Brazil is actually further east than most of the US. And if you look at a globe or a map, that might not be readily apparent.
Mhm.
Um, but you guys, especially most people on the coast, have this time zone that's like further removed. So that's one thing that always trips me up with Brazil and interacting with Brazilians is the time zone.
Me too. Like sometimes I just want to hang out with my American friends, and then it's like 3 a.m. here, but it's like 7 in the morning in America. I'm exaggerating, obviously.
Right. So when it comes to, let's refocus here and talk a little bit more about CI and your channel. When it comes to comprehensible input, in your opinion, as a content creator, somebody who's passionate about this, what makes comprehensible input good? Because certainly not all comprehensible input is good. So what
Yeah.
is the distinguisher there? What makes it a good piece of CI content versus a bad piece of CI content?
So I can only talk about it as a beginner right now. So like I can talk about what has been useful to me as a beginner. I think that a lot of the videos that have comprehensible input in the title, and for beginners, they actually have embedded subtitles, and they're pretty hard to pre-flow with them, because like they keep popping random translations on the screen and stuff. So it's just really distracting. And now that I'm sort of approaching a low intermediate level in Japanese, I thought that I was going to be able to understand some of that stuff, but I'm not. Like it's pretty damn hard content. So I think that to make good comprehensible input for beginners, I have tried a bunch of stuff. I think that if you focus on concrete things instead of abstract ideas, that's really good. And if you focus more on the experience more than anything, that's the best part. And try to sort of ignore the cultural stuff. Because like we know that the easier the content is, the faster you're gonna acquire the language. And when you insert a lot of cultural stuff, the people you're teaching, they didn't grow up with those references, so they don't know what you're talking about. So like that decreases their comprehension. And I actually have a lot of trouble with Japanese because of that. A lot of the videos that say beginner or intermediate, like I don't understand them because they talk about. I understand some stuff because I don't know. I read Rashomon. Well, I said it with a Spanish accent. Sorry, Rashomon or something once. But a lot of the times they're talking about things for the period blah blah blah, and I don't know anything about it. And I assume I understand why, because most of the people in the audience for the Japanese learning community, they know that stuff. Because they're mostly doing HAT, they're doing Refold. So they're sort of grinding the culture and they're doing flashcards for the prefectures and stuff. But for what I do, it's not really helpful. So I would say TLDR, like focusing on concrete stuff and making the experience pleasurable, like make it fun, and avoid creating distance with your students.
Interesting. So what you have experienced doing ALG for Japanese is that people hard code translations onto the screen, which you don't want, and you have found that they will talk about cultural things that may be totally foreign to a beginner learner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a very interesting concept because sometimes it can be hard to remember what people know and what they don't know. I'll give an example. One time, many moons ago, I was cooking taco meat. and I had, a group of people with me, and I was like, we're doing taco night. We're going to have tacos. So, being in Asia at the time, when I went to cook the taco meat, I stepped away, and I came back, and somebody had added soy sauce to the taco meat. And, the palate was different. So the next time I made taco meat, I made sure to say, by the way, don't add soy sauce to this. So I step away and I come back, and the hair on the back of my neck stands up, and I'm like, something is wrong. Okay, my taco sense was going off. I go back into the kitchen, and I catch the person pouring oyster sauce into it. They're like, I didn't add soy sauce. I'm like, yes, but I did. And it didn't occur to me to have to forbid soy sauce and oyster sauce when cooking this dish, because as an American, the culture, that would just never occur to an American to do.
Yeah.
So the TLDR, as you said, for this is, it can be hard to assume what people know and what they don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know necessarily how much cultural insight they have into your culture when doing something. And I can totally see how that can make things really trippy if they're embedding all of these little Japanese cultural references into their videos, and you're like, rank beginner, you're not a weeb, you don't really know all this stuff. I can see how that would be difficult.
Yeah, there's stuff that everyone knows. Like, everyone knows sushi, everyone knows Dragon Ball, everyone knows, I don't know.
Vital Wave.
Have you seen that?
Onda Vital.
No. I thought you were talking about Ride Your Wave. It's an OVA.
No.
Onda
The
Vital.
European version of Dragon Ball Z calls the Kamehameha wave Onda Vital.
Yeah. Onda Vital.
Which is bizarre to me. But
no, it makes sense. It makes sense.
It makes sense. It's a wave of energy. Like,
actually, I did a stint. Can you call it that? Like, I dabbled in Galician. Dabbled, if you even may call it that. I immersed in Galician for a while, and I watched the entire first Dragon Ball, the OG, in Galician, and it's wonderful. It's like really, really funny and cute, and
I'm a big fan of the original Dragon Ball.
Me too.
I think it's much less serious and more funny.
Love the comedy.
Than Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
Dragon Ball Z takes on this edgy sort of persona, but the original Dragon Ball was just funny. It was just comedy, like comedy gold. So yeah, Vital Wave. That's an interesting thing that could be talked about, is like, with these multi-center languages, like with English, you've got the US, you've got Canada, you've got Australia, you've got the UK. Sometimes we get different dubs of the same series.
Yeah.
And that can sort of change things as well. We're getting back into, like, again, culture, right? So when it comes to actually making content, you do the videos and you do the lessons. Which would you say is harder to do? Is it harder to make the videos, or is it harder to teach one-on-one?
I think it's hard to teach one-on-one.
Really? I would have imagined that would have been the easier thing.
No.
Because you can react to the person.
That's part of the problem. Like, you never know what you're gonna get. I actually have a student who used to be in a cult, and just so you see how cultural knowledge is sometimes even more important than, like, relatability, let's say. Because she's from Peru, and I was talking about things that everyone knows about, like things from pop culture, and she didn't know anything about that. So, like, she didn't understand an entire lesson and only told me at the end. And because she didn't know those references.
She didn't have the
But there are
cultural
things like
background.
everyone knows about. So that was pretty surprising. Um, the videos are fun because like you don't have to deal with anyone, and hopefully in the future I'm gonna have enough videos so that people don't have to have to crosstalk with me anymore. They can just watch the videos, and maybe once they are intermediate, then they can crosstalk and stuff. So hopefully I can make that happen someday. Um, but it's hard, man. Especially hard because I give in too much as well, because like everything's tailor made, everything's like, like I know the students like this and that and that. It's very personalized and stuff. So I'm trying to focus on getting intermediate students now, because we can just talk. I don't have to prepare as much. I can just talk, and we can have a, more of a real conversation. Like instead of me doing all the talking, we can just have this back and forth and stuff, and that's what I want to give preference to.
Okay. Interesting. So that really surprised me, because in my mind, I would have figured that coming up with the videos would be more difficult.
No, like the content is
precisely
already,
because with the video, you don't really have that same feedback. Whereas if you're doing a crosstalk, you can actively adjust what you're doing to the person's level. Whereas the video, it's one and done. It's either at their level or it's not. Whereas if you're actively teaching someone, you can raise or lower the difficulty as you please, right? You can look at their body language, see how much they're actually understanding, and change things up. But that's precisely why you find that more difficult.
yeah, but there's more to it. Like with my lessons, there may be most of the time you're like just getting a lesson once a week and stuff. So your exposure is probably not gonna be as big. But if you're watching the videos, like even if you're hearing something all the time, just hearing something all the time makes your brain like try to figure out what that means. So that's just easier to consume. It's easier for the people. And if I'm saying something that the person does not understand at the moment, it matters, because I have to make like everything comprehensible. So like I have to take detours and a bunch of stuff. It's pretty wild.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that makes sense as to why you find making the videos a little bit, I guess, less stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for people who are interested in booking you, how do they go about that? How would, if somebody watches this and says, "Hey, I want to learn from Looney," how would they go about contacting you?
They can message me on immersinportuguese at gmail.com.
immersinportuguese@gmail.com. All right, very cool. You've got me hyped. You can't tell right now because I'm pretty sleepy, but internally, I'm very hyped. I wanna book a demo lesson. I feel like that would be fun. Because as much as I love immersion, it can be lonely.
Yeah.
Like I took my tablet to a coffee shop and I was reading Link and doing some stories. But I'm a social creature, as are most people to some degree. And I think that having a teacher who really understands immersion could be quite fun for me.
Yeah. I think I plan to have some lessons with Velvet Cookie at some point, because after Japanese, my plan is to learn Norwegian. And we talk pretty frequently. We're pretty acquainted with each other, so I think it would be a good experience, especially because like when you know a place from, you're talking to a person from X place, and you know places on that place, like about this and that and that, and then you want to talk about that all the time with the person, like you want to ask a bunch of stuff. That's what I want to do with her.
And before we go, I've got a couple questions for you. First one is there anything that you wanted to talk about on the podcast that I didn't bring up?
Yes.
Okay, and what is that?
I would like to talk about outputting.
Okay.
So, about my writing. Like, yeah, I got a lot of comments about people, they didn't know that I was not a native. And that's fine. I don't even remember how it was when I started writing. I don't remember getting a lot of corrections, but I'm sure it wasn't as pretty. I'm someone who actually observes a lot before joining, and that's part of my problem in language learning because it handicapped me because I delayed speaking for so long that I'm playing catch up basically. Like I have only 10 hours of shadowing, and that's pretty much it. Like most of the experiences I have is just like me talking a bit on the after parties and stuff. Let alone I don't have any experience being interviewed and stuff. And I would like to say that it'll be okay, like, and that you don't need all the fancy linguistics knowledge. There's a person on Refold called Miso, and they introduced me this channel called Trans Voice Lessons. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically a channel about trans people modifying their voices. And I really knew about the theory, but I didn't have the sensory experience. So that channel like prompted me to just take the plunge. So what I've been doing lately is let my body adjust to the sensory experience that's English. So I found myself doing a bunch of stuff that I didn't think I could do. For example, before this, I would hear a sound and I would hear that it was different from what I was used to hearing. And instead of just trying to reproduce it, I would go on Wikipedia and read a bunch of articles, hear a bunch of audios, and then try to produce it. But then that just like, it made me worry too much. It was taking me away from the moment. But once I started to let go of that type of stuff, I started making sounds like I never thought I was capable of, and things that I had just heard. So I would like to say that this is the only hot take I have on language learning, I think, and I would not die for it. Don't bug me on my DM, anyone. That if you just tell your body to make something, it's gonna find a way to adjust itself to make that happen. And that's what's been happening to me with outputting.
Right, interesting. And I'll make sure that people do not slide into your DMs to bother you too much about your hot take. The last question I have for you is, what is your parting advice for the listeners? What is your sage advice? What is your hot tip, if any?
Yeah. I think my tip depends a lot on the person's target language. I think my general tip would be focus on having experiences through the language more than anything. For example, Velvet Cookie, she's the person who inspires me the most on language learning. She, instead of, just taking the classes and stuff, she goes to Thai events, to cultural events, and she built like this network of friendships that people that she knows that are people from Thailand live in Norway. And she goes to these Thai parties, and whenever she's at she goes to places where Thai people work as well. So like she's living it. I would say that if I could give any advice is that like live it, live the language if you can.
So, live the language. I think that's good advice. Definitely a non-zero number of immersion learners can forget that.
True.
So,
I was one of them.
So Gabriel, Looney, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure, and I'm so sorry for bugging you for the past several weeks to come on, but we finally made it happen.
Yeah.
And shout out again, what's your channel?
Immerse in Portuguese.
Immerse in Portuguese, and you can also find you at immerseinportuguese@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Perfect. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Refold podcast. If you're watching the live premiere, you're in luck. Right as it ends, we have an after party over on the Refold Central Discord server. Come join us by using refold.link/join and chat about the episode. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to hear more, you can find older episodes to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you thought about the video by liking and leaving a comment below. Do you have suggestions for upcoming visitors or requests for particular topics? Please feel free to reach out to me on Discord at GeorgePig #5413 or via email at clayton@refold.la. Thank you all for watching and or listening, and I'll see you next week.
Hey, as you know, there's a lot of language learning advice out there, which can make it kind of overwhelming and difficult to actually get going on your own learning. If you feel like you're struggling to figure out language learning, you're not alone. It's an extremely complicated process with tons of different steps. If you're looking for a step-by-step guide to create the perfect language learning routine for you, then you have to check out our new course. We spent thousands of hours designing a simple and straightforward process that you can use to create your own personalized language routine that actually works. We understand that every learner is different and that you have to roll with the punches and adapt. Every day for 30 days, I walk you through everything you need to know to build an effective learning routine, no matter your circumstances. We give you the advice and resources you need to ensure your success, so you don't have to waste time looking for stuff to do and can focus on learning. And if any questions do come up, don't worry. We are always there to answer any questions and clear up confusion. And it's all backed by our 90-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. If, for whatever reason, something's not quite working for you, we insist you get every penny back. It's time for you to stop wishing that you could learn a second language. It's time to become the master of your language learning journey. Check out the link below to get instant access and start your journey today.